Can we dare to imagine that our lives, like Mary's, can become vessels of hope, justice, and fierce compassion?
The sacred joy is not naive. It rises in the midst of uncertainty and sings away. It grows in the cracks of everything that is undone and refuses to be silenced. Oh, keep going.
Mary sang of the lowly lifted, the hungry filled, the powerful conquered, and mercy made known.
Joy breaks through when we choose her way, authentic, bold, rooted in the hope that another story is possible.
May this phrase echo Mary's lips and her vision of a world turned toward God.
That's it. You who reveal yourself in dreams, you who reveal yourselves in poetry and song and story, you who reveal yourself in starlight and twilight, moonlight and sunshine, you who are mystery, who cannot be captured in any name. We know that you are present in spirit and in flesh, in joy and in sadness. Enable us this day to enter into communion with you, in memories that grow stronger with age, in childhood wonder, in secret shame, in broken hearts. In all of these things, let us hear the ancient invitation to remember that our deepest identity is in you, and that you live in the deepest sanctuary of our hearts. May we live and move and breathe and sing this day in this most glorious mystery. Amen. So I'd like to say a few words about the pieces of our sacred text that we know as the birth narratives. All right? So we have 4 accounts of the life of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew begins with the birth stories that include Joseph and wise men. Luke says nothing of these. Mark starts right at the baptism of Jordan. We don't encounter Jesus until he's about 30 years old. Luke has created very different birth narratives, and John's different again. So I want to speak to the purpose of these birth narratives. You know the ones. You've got the nativity scenes memorized, because what they do in most nativity scenes is they mash the birth stories of Luke and the birth stories of Matthew, so you get the whole family in the same picture. When in actual fact, well, you know what? It's a story. It moves and changes. We can do a mixture of both of those stories. But most importantly is to recognize that while whenever we think of the Christmas story, we think of the mashup of these two stories, and they take us to the manger, and then that's the portal. And it's like, oh, that wasn't the purpose, really. When Matthew and Luke created both of their birth stories, like John Dominique Crossan says, they thought through all of the melodies and themes of this ministry of Jesus and the subsequent ministry of the early church, and they developed a narrative, because that's what the ancients did when they wanted to speak to meaning and mystery. They created a story, and the story is the portal to the meaning and the mystery. And so so what is most important, I think, and these all often get lost in the baby. I mean, it's very interesting. So we had a rehearsal, command performance, choir the other night at Bridge Street United. And I'd never seen this before, but what a great idea. They had this nativity out front, no baby in the manger. And I thought, oh. And then somebody said, oh, what happened? Oh, did they lose the baby? And I'm like, no, it's not about the baby yet. Just wait. There are bigger things unfolding, and it's these bigger things unfolding that we are told that are the portal to the baby. And so the bigger things, really, is this collection of characters that are meant to be mirrors of ourselves, right? So it's a way for us to be part of the story. It's not like, oh, okay, here we go, and it's all about Jesus again. It's bigger than that. Its incarnation, our own included. So, with that introduction, I have to say something else, sorry. So, whether we like it or not, those of us of a certain age, I'm going to choose my age, all right? Because I wasn't here during wartime. So, I've been here during a relatively cushy time on the planet. The other purpose, I think, that these birth stories serve is that they lay the context for what was going on in the world in Palestine at that time. And it wasn't pretty. It was the Roman Empire. It was might makes right. It was stand in line, do what you're told, live what is, and still, these very ordinary people just showed up to be part of a different story. And so I think that we need those birth story characters now more than any other time in my lifetime. Okay. So I'm going to do a retelling of this story that is so familiar to us. It is the visitation of the angel to Mary. And again, let's remember, we have to get the clues within these ancient narratives that as soon as you hear the word angel, I don't expect you to drop your postmodern 21st century brain and go, oh yeah, and they wore white with a gold halo, all right? Whenever we hear the word angel, it means that something is afoot. That's some sort of invitation, revelation, epiphany, and that the sacred is somehow always in our midst. The messenger came in on a breath of wind, quiet as dawn, bright as the truth you can no longer turn away from. Do not be afraid, he whispered, as if he knew how fear gathers in the body, how it curls in the ribs and tightens the beautiful, trembling heart. You are seen. You are chosen for a story that has been singing through creation since the first light broke open the dark. And Mary, young, wondering, standing at the threshold of her ordinary life, felt the world tilt toward possibility. Something within her emerged, soft and fierce at the same time. The holy breath brushed her spirit and asked her to carry hope in the most intimate way, to give her very body to a future shaped by love and justice. She did not understand it all, but she understood enough. Let it be, she said, not with resignation, but with the deep courage of one who knows that love is worth everything. And in that moment, a new world began to stir. Mary's voice rose in song, not fragile, not meek, but full-throated and unapologetic. A song spun from the threads of liberation. A song that spoke about the hungry filled, the powerful overturned, the forgotten lifted into the center, and the earth remade by mercy. Her yes became music. Her music became movement. Her movement became revolution. And joy, holy, startling joy, broke open in her, ready to be born. Well, here we are about to shut the door on 2026. And what we have seen unfold around the world is, well, the unveiling of power, the collusion of politics and billionaires, the fragility of truth, the fragility of all of us. And yet those who have gone before would say, this world is not a new one. We have been here before. And the invitation from the beginning of our sacred text is an invitation to see, amid the rising and falling of empires, an underlying sacred story that is always rising, always emerging, always challenging, always inviting us to practice a new world. And this world is always in antithesis to a world dominated by greed and injustice and fear and anxiety and finger pointing. This invitation always acting in alignment with the sacred vision that Mary articulates in her song, that ancient longing for peace, for justice, for the sharing of the earth's resources. And once upon a time, I don't know, maybe about 20 years ago, maybe even earlier, I thought, we're really on our way. We're really on our way to reshaping the world with that sacred vision. I didn't say making the church greater, because they weren't always the same thing. But we are acknowledging our roots in racism and colonialism and patriarchy. We are acknowledging the horrors of war. We are embracing the wisdom of all spiritual traditions. We have social safety nets in place. Wow! Compared to 100 years ago, surely we must be on our way. Except the divide between the haves and have-nots is growing around the world and in our own backyard. Except the narrative around care of the planet, our home, has been dimmed and trumped by the need for more oil, bigger homes, which results in the destruction of arable land and now a threat to the kind of food security that we have taken for granted. Because drought came to so many communities at the same time this year. All of which is to say, we, like those first century Palestinians, are awakening to our own vulnerability. Awakening to the vulnerability of the ecosystems that sustain life on earth. And maybe in this vulnerability, in this new humility, maybe there might be born an openness, maybe even a desperation to practice a new world. To step into this ancient conversation, to find ourselves in a birthing narrative, trusting its power. Because those who hold great power throughout every season on earth have not used that exceptional power for the sake of the health and healing for the common person or for the sake of protecting the planet. And what our sacred text reveals again and again is this: those with great power never did exercise it for the common good and have consistently assaulted the sacred balance. And therefore, those partners, those co-creators, those who imagined a world made new were always those on the edges, those with no status, those who had been abandoned, left behind by the systems that propped up the powerful. So I think this season is an opportunity for us to sit with these ordinary characters like Mary as an affirmation that we, as ordinary folk, can participate in the birthing of another world, which our tradition has called the kingdom of God. This kingdom, and the language is problematic, right? Because suddenly we went, oh, we get a kingdom too? Yay! And can our kingdom be better than their kingdom? Because that's kind of what the church did when Constantine kind of took it over in the 4th century. So anyway, this kingdom was always the point. Not a kingdom led by a king that would defeat the bad guys, but an actual birthing of a new reality right in the middle of all that was going down. And there's a lot going down right now. So here's an example. Many of you remember Marion Boudet, the Bishop of Washington, who the day after Trump's inauguration spoke from the pulpit to him, inviting now the most powerful man in the world to practice mercy and compassion. Suddenly, everybody knew who she was. And I've listened to her speak several times about how we develop courage. And I'm going to share with you some words from her book, How We Learn to Be Brave, Decisive Moments in Life and Faith. I am convinced, she writes, that we all have the capacity to live within a narrative of great adventure, no matter what our life circumstances. The courage to be brave when it matters most requires a lifetime of small decisions that set us on a path of self-awareness, attentiveness, and the willingness to risk failure or criticism for what we believe is right. It is also a profoundly spiritual experience, one in which we feel a part of something larger than ourselves and guided somehow by a larger spirit at work in the world and in us. Decisive moments, she continues, make believers out of everyone. For no matter what name we give to it, the inexplicable, unmerited experience of a power greater than our own working through us is real. The audacious truth is that we matter in the realization of all that is good and noble and true. We matter. And therefore, let's not focus on the manger. Let us recall that for that story to be born, that exceptional human being and teacher to be born, all kinds of ordinary people had to buy in and stand up and be with him in the unfolding. And so I struggle a lot with my favorite music of the year. I mean, these glorious Christmas hymns are just, and they move through us, and they capture us, and they move us to tears and sometimes smiles. But very often they speak of this thing from above. And yet the characters who we speak about, they are those who said yes to a co-creation. It's incarnation, it's co-creation, it is imagination that fuels this story. Nobody's coming from heaven to save anybody. So I'll share another story, even closer to home, of somebody who practices a new world every morning when she opens her eyes. So I spent some time with Joan Cameron this week, and I've begun to ask particularly people, maybe I shouldn't say at what age I begin to ask this question because some of you will get nervous. I like asking the question to people in their 90s, and she is now 98. If you could go back to 10 minutes in your life, what would you choose? And Joan is so wonderful. She goes, oh, Lynn, I've lost so much of my memory. I can't think. Well, I know it would be maybe when the kids were little, but I'm just so frustrated that I can't remember things. And within 5 minutes, she told me, but I do remember the day I decided I wanted to be a nurse. And I said, well, when did that happen? She said, well, I was 6 years old. It's a lovely story. So then after a time of visiting, I read to her from the New Revised Standard Version of the birth story. And she sat there and she just went, oh, I remember that a little differently. And she proceeded to tell the entire story in the King James Version. And then I was about to leave, and she said, I think I remember something else. And she shared with me a poem that I'm going to share with you now. It is not a poem that I knew. Let me give you its background. It is a poem entitled Salutation to the Dawn. All right. So it's like it's a daily commissioning, a daily sacred practice. It was written about 300 BC by a man whose name was Kalidasa. And it was a poem, I already told you what it was called. So basically, the poem is an invitation to embrace the sacred reality of every day from the moment we open our eyes. And she only forgot 2 lines, the first and the last. So I'm going to give you the first and the last so that you can hear the context in which it is, all right? So the first line is, listen to the exhortation of the dawn, the invitation of the sun as it rises. And then it concludes with the line, such is the salutation of the dawn. All right. Okay, wait a minute. We need to do that again because we need sound. And
By all
okay,
the
wait a minute.
verity.
Just let me start again. All right, here we are.
Look to this day, for it is life, the very light of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of our existence. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every day a dream of happiness, and tomorrow a vision of hope and peace.
Many of us have reflected over the years on how deeply respectful we are of Joan's grace. And I think her grace, despite the profound challenges in her life for several years now, is the result of choosing a better story every single day. And she, at 98 years old, despite her infirmities, still practices her agency to participate in this glorious exhortation of the dawn. Another Mary in our midst, who despite her circumstances and the challenges that she faced in her life, agreed to be part of the birthing of another story. And that invitation is for all of us. I have become acquainted with a woman who does not get out of bed in the morning until she has a conversation with herself about, and you'll recognize this metaphor, which wolf she will feed. She recognizes her own vulnerability, her own propensity to be embraced by a story of fear that drives her to striving, that drives her to judging and injuring both herself and others. It is a daily sacred practice of inviting in and giving birth to that other story. And this daily practice, I think, has a very significant byproduct. And that is joy. As we recall the gift of life, the gift of one another, our identity as beloved, our participation in this sacred community of all those throughout the ages who said yes to choose this better, glorious, sometimes crazy story as an antidote to the powers that be and the anxiety that they facilitate. I guess that is why I lean into the practice of the Catholic and Celtic mystics who practiced the hours, stopping several times a day, wherever they were, milking cows, tending sheep, lighting a fire, and dropped into that deeper sacred story, so as to be fueled again by a deeper communion and sinking into the sanctuary of those gone before, which is why we just continue to tell the story. People who knew times like this, and yet who leaned into and practiced another way. I don't know where I got this piece of music, but I think it's appropriate for our time of contemplation.
How long will the poor be hungry? How long will the babies cry? How long will the people weep? For the trees are gone and the wells run dry. The wells run dry. There's work in the wheat. Give us the will to dream, the will to dream. Give us the will to dream. Give us the will to dream, the will to dream. Give us the will to dream as we prepare the way. How long have we held a promise to be kept, to bring down the proud and mighty, make sure every belly's filled, make sure every belly's filled. There's work in the wind. Give us the will to dream, the will to dream. Give us the will to dream. Give us the will to dream, the will to dream. Give us the will to dream as we prepare the way. There's work in the way, longing for the things of love, living from our longing, preparing for the one whose word